wait for us. All right. Hello, everybody. Good to see some familiar faces and some new faces, quite a mix. So that's very nice that you're all here. Welcome to this third lecture of our lecture series, What is the Anthropocene? Today, we'll learn more about biodiversity and biodiversity loss, as well as landscape management. And we invited two experts to tell us a bit more about the topics. Just to give a bit of context, so this has been organized by the Amsterdam Sustainability Institute, of which I'm a coordinator, and we do this together with Sjoerd, Kluiving, who's our fellow of the Anthropocene for this semester. And together we set up this program. So as I said, this is the third edition or third session. We'll have another one on colonialism and inequality coming up in 2 weeks. And then we continue with health and justice, and we conclude the series with a discussion or with the presentations and the lecture on the new economy. Yeah, please come in. So yeah, we'll just start with an introduction by Sjoerd, and continue with our speakers after that. So,
okay, also welcome on my behalf. Welcome, come in. And today we have two excellent speakers, Louise Vet and Niels Debonne. And I'm going to do a small introduction on biodiversity loss and landscape management, because it's also close to my own research. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about my European project, Terra Nova, and also a little bit about Matti Berg, who was excused today because he had family affairs. And so that is his project, Veen Vitaal. The first slide I usually always use in Terra Nova is to explain that landscapes are in danger, that landscapes have a big stress, and that's questionable because they're essential services delivered to humanity. We get all the water, food, energy, and clean air from landscapes, so we should actually be very grateful to landscapes. And they also have immeasurable values as cultural, scientific, educational, recreational, even spiritual resources. And despite all this clear evidence that they are so beneficial to us, they are threatened by humanity. And many landscapes and ecosystems are presently threatened by this proximal impact of deforestation, land degradation, uncontrolled urbanization, and also human-induced global change. So
maybe you have to click on the thing again.
Yeah. Okay. This one as well. Yeah. Okay. So this slide was also shown last time, and it will appear multiple more times in presentations today, even I believe. That's the planetary boundary concept by Johan Rockström, already 14 years, almost 15 years ago, developed 2 weeks ago, updated by Richardson and all in Science Advances. They show that almost 6 out of 9 planetary boundaries are overstepped currently by humanity. And we can see that the biosphere, integrity, the functional and the genetic parts are both exceeding, are the largest overstepped factor, even larger than climate change. And all the things we talk about is climate change today. So, and where's biodiversity loss? So that's something to keep in mind. So biodiversity has sharply declined due to land use intensification, urban development, climate change. Intensive land use has also resulted in soil subsidence, eutrophication, land, water, air pollution, and also increased gas emissions. And we think in Terra Nova that landscape transition can only be achieved by close collaboration of scientists, landowners, and also the citizens and other stakeholders to restore the biodiversity, essential ecosystem functions and services, including rewilding. So basically, sustainable landscape management faces multiple challenges. The water, food, energy nexus, which is called, is a term also which has this interrelation of transitions and of what things humanity stands for. And added to that is, of course, within the energy mix is the transition to a low carbon society. And yeah, we need this more nuanced understanding of changing human environment interactions, the current state, and is required, in fact, to able to develop sustainable ways of dealing with these landscapes in the future. So land managers today need to take all these physical, social, and cultural characteristics of landscape which they're responsible incorporated. And they also need to understand how their landscapes evolved as a product of both cultural and natural influence through prehistoric historic times and the current trajectories. And this sort of informational energy regimes from the past gives us a new vision on perspectives on natural and cultural heritage. So this is the way how it is built up with reconstructing past environment energy regimes, rethinking human environment interaction, and redesigning land management and tools for policy. So I don't have the time to go all of this. You can also look at the website, look at all the publications. I'm gonna share you for the discussion now the work package 4, some of the products of the redesigning land management tools for policy. The project is almost at its end, so we're now sort of getting lots of results out of the researchers. So we have 2 tastes of landscape management. There's one set of researchers focused on the potential of European abandoned agricultural lands. What do they give us for new Green Deal objectives, and also scenarios for water management, and also looking at mapping biodiversity and ecosystem services, and also with the synergies of agricultural change trajectories in Europe, including the trade-offs. The second set of landscape management for a low carbon society is from researchers based at Leipzig at the IDIF Center, and they are looking at unconventional or conventional funding mechanisms to rewilding and the opportunities for funding rewilding in Europe. Also look at divergent roles for herbivore eutrophic forests. Look at in depth, all researches in towards this rewilding history and rewilding potential. And also look on the cultural side at participatory scenarios for restoring European landscapes that they give a plurality of nature values. Since a couple of months, we have a MOOC, which is developed by our researchers, by 9 of these ESR researchers, and it's online, it's free, and you can do it as students, as a teacher. You can enroll, and it contains multiple chapters of to become a future landscape management, and to help also maybe your own company or institution in future landscape decision making. Okay, a few words on Veen Vitaal. Veen Vitaal is a project, a NWO-funded project by Matti Berg, my colleague from IVM, and he's looking at. They have a research cycle and a user cycle. And they have multiple partners united from the societal sphere, also from research sphere, and they look at from the industry. And the basic message of Veen Vitaal is to work together with scientists, species conservation organizations, nature managers, farmers, administrators, and many more actors in a sort of living lab. I think that Louise will also talk about living lab in her presentation, touches upon it maybe. Yeah. And Veen Vitaal investigates intervention in the landscape effective to restore biodiversity, to halt peat degradation and green gas emissions. And also Veen Vitaal wants to develop an integral set of simple, reliable indicators that can be used to quantify and monitor the transition to sustainable peat landscape. Okay, so far the intro. So Neele, you can introduce our first speaker.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Sjoerd, for this first insight. And with that, we continue with our, I'm just going to put it in between, our next first speaker that we invited today. So that is Louise Vet. Louise is a former director of the Netherlands Institute of Ecology. So that's the NIOO. And an emeritus professor of evolutionary ecology at Wageningen University. Your research involves the functioning of multi-trophic interactions, which delivers basic knowledge for the sustainable development of agro-ecosystems. And you're also an elected member of the Royal Netherlands Academy of Arts and Sciences, or KNAW. And you're also involved in many other activities apart from research. So maybe you can also tell our audience. I think it's actually quite interesting how to, what else to do than research to
absolutely, because that's what impact. It's all about.
Yeah. So with that, I'll leave the floor to you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a great pleasure to be here. I always like being in Amsterdam, probably because the students are more critical, I often think, and willing to make a plan and go for it. And so I've given some other lectures also for biology and everything, so that's nice. Okay, so the Anthropocene. Well, you've heard all about it, so I can go right to the next slide, which you also have seen. And indeed, I don't have to say much about it, but if you look at the slide right, so 6 out of 9 of these areas are indeed over how you say that, past and outside the safe part of our planet. And this is where you see biodiversity, and the new one has come in with novel entities, poisoned and actual things, microplastics, etc. But also look at the phosphorus and the nitrogen as a big problem. And if you see, our economy is growing nicely, and we think, "Whoa, great," and our natural capital is going down. And this is exactly what's happening, and it cannot continue that way. And the data show it, that biodiversity, I could talk about that for a long time, but I won't. I think you know this. It's a heavy decline, and the Netherlands is the worst one in Europe, actually, with regards to biodiversity. Now, this is to sort of make it very easy slide in your brain, because I hate the word services. It's very anthropocentric. It's like for us, that's of course complete nonsense. This is in fact, what we get for free. It's not in our books. If we destroy it, it's we have to sort of try to restore it again, but we can't often. But we can destroy it, and then we have private profit, and then public costs to actually repair it again. So that's how our economy is. Now, this is a very sort of public talk. You've undoubtedly heard about tipping points. It's like the Jenga puzzle. You can lose species, and then at a certain point, the whole thing crashes. But we do not know what the key species are. We do not know exactly when we are at that tipping point. And so it is a dangerous situation that we are doing this for ourselves. So I often show this because for me, we all know the IPCC and Extinction Rebellions here, etc. But I really think the problem is the IPBES studies, they're not the climate people, but they are the ecologists, the functioning of the whole planet. And I think I see climate change as a symptom of the bad way how we deal with our planet. And of course, they're completely interrelated too. Now, here I was in the Atlantic forest on the east coast of Argentina and Brazil, 7% hotspot of biodiversity. And we know, what you see is the leftovers of these fantastic forests. And in fact, we know that the current loss of biodiversity is mainly due to land use. And here, this is also from the Living Planet report from WWF, which is a scientific report, and to show you 80% of global deforestation, greenhouse gases, 30% is due to our food system. And so if we look again, also a paper by Tillman in Nature, showing that about 80% of all these threatened bird and mammal species are in peril by agriculturally driven habitat loss. Habitat loss is really something that, and I'm going to show you a horrible slide too, but just listen to me. At the top, 10,000 years ago, we had this land. 1/3 of it is being deforested and taken up. And what did we do with that? So we actually reduced it. And what did we do with that? It's agricultural land. And 77% of that agricultural land is just used for feeding our cattle and for grazing. And only 23% is used for crops. And that is already including the meat and the dairy products. So and this is still ongoing. I'll show you the soy as well. And so you see the land is used basically for soy production for animal feed, not so much for humans, a little bit for industry. And this is ongoing. And there's about 3 billion people in upcoming countries that become rich enough to eat meat. So I think we should go to a very different way of, to a pro-biodiversity. Differences for animal proteins. Now, I just wanted to give you that along. And because what food production has become, and that's unfortunately an ongoing development. I already said that it's an industrial production. Ecological costs are externalized, and there is a loss of biodiversity or of diversity at all scales. At the landscape scale, we only feed the world with 12 crop species, and we have less genetic variation because we pick out the very best one with the highest, production, etc. And so we see that. And in the Netherlands, of course, you may know, I don't know how many of you are Dutch, but we have quite a nitrogen problem and other problems. So we have 55-60% of our land is farmland, and we stripped it all after the war. So we have a problem. Now let's go to the solutions, because it's much nicer to go to the solutions, right? And the solutions, I think, are in history of how this planet actually functions. More than 3.5 billion years of research and development, I always say, to industrial. And so we can learn a lot from that. And my 3 lessons of sustainability is energy transition and use energy of the sun, circularity, close the loops. I mean, that's how this planet functions, right? So that's our how you say that, circularity ambition that we have, and a circular economy. And then, of course, and the third one is diversity. The diversity is the basis of life. So I often show this because the major problem with us is that we think we are above nature. I think this is a lousy picture anyway, with this guy there and that woman there. So wrong system, right? Okay. So I think this is what we should try to do, and everybody can help with that. So lessons from ecology. I'm an ecologist, and we study how nature works. And basically it can be war, and eat or being eaten, obviously too. But it really is a system. And that's important that we start to think of systems, because it's the system and the collaboration between all these species that gives the system its resilience. And our economy is completely different. We work in silos. You either do this or you do that. And I think what we should do is have much more integral approaches to everything, especially land use. Now, the financial system, the banks, the insurance companies, etc., they already realized this. And I'm really happy, because this money makes the world go round, still is, unfortunately, I could say. But I think half of the GDP, so everything we produce for our economy, is dependent on this nature. So really, the planet will go on, but we cannot go on. And especially not with an economy that we have now. Now, and protecting nature and it can prevent global economic losses of 2.7 trillion per year. That's 12 zeros, guys. That's a lot. And so we see that now there is a pledge, a finance pledge for biodiversity. because banks, insurance companies, etc., investors, they don't want to invest anymore. You could do a little bit less with your CO2 and you come high in the sustainability index. But if you screw up that ecosystem, the same time, you're not doing very well, right? And they realize that. So there is a reputation risk, there is a financial risk that you actually have when you continue with destroying nature. And sometimes the nature-based solutions are the most cost-effective ones. The mangrove forests in coast protection is the easiest, but nobody can earn money with it, and therefore it doesn't happen a lot. But it is something that we should really understand. Now, anyway, as an ecologist, I was just sick and tired of it, that I have been telling that the world goes down the drain for the last 45, 50 years. And the system goes on. And that's exactly why we started from the ecologists, the Netherlands Ecological Research Network, which I was chairing that board, and we as ecologists from all universities and institutions said, we can't go on like this. We had the 2017 publication on the loss of insects. 75% of our insects are gone in the last 30 years. Hard data. And so we said, we must change the system. It's a societal problem. We must solve it society-wide. And that's what we did. We actually we actually brought together a lot of people that never want to talk to one another, really. But we said, what are you going to do for biodiversity? What are you going to do? Give us a commitment that we can actually keep you to it. And so that's what we've done with all these different people. And it's really about a nature inclusive landscape approach. Now, you may know this picture. Our ambition is bending the curve. This is the normal line. And I'll tell you, I started biology in 1971. I was up there. But we only have data from about, 1990 or something like that. So you can imagine, I don't want to go down this. I don't want to do this either. That's when you kind of put a gate around a piece of nature and you protect it. The only way is more sustainable production and more sustainable consumption. Different proteins. Okay, interesting. So please take this for granted. That's true. So what? And then we said we do it all over the Netherlands. We started in the Netherlands. It's going into Europe as well. But we said, okay, nature areas, farmland, but also public spaces and urban and industrial spaces where people live, where people work. Why? It's a human right to have nature around you. And we actually, by talking to one another, I think it's very interesting when you have totally different disciplines and sectors, you still come up with this you can identify. And this number one came up highest. You must have shared values, but you also have a development, you need development of new business models. Yeah, a farmer is not going to do something else if he can't be green if he's red on the bank, they say. And so you also need laws and regulations. They're often exactly the opposite, steering the opposite of what you want. And we know we need the scientific knowledge, we need the education, etc. as well. And we need collaboration on the landscape level. In a regional area, it has a history, it belongs there, it has an identity. So it must be at the landscape level. So we must go to a transition of agriculture. Read this excellent paper by Pablo Titonel, who's a professor at Groningen University. And and I think it's a system approach. We now work, and I've also worked a lot on above below ground interactions. We know there is interaction between crops, between species, with landscape elements that influence one another. I'll show you here, if you have these grain fields and you have these flower-rich banks, then you actually have less pests, you have less pesticides that you need, you have more natural enemies that prevent the outbreak, etc. And so there is a lot possible. And it all starts with the soil. Now, this week is still Soil Animal Week. Yeah, so you have to, what do you call it? Dierendag is 4th of October, but then this runs till 8th of October. Wereld Bodemdierendag. Yeah, week. So you look up and have a look at Bodemdierendag. That's really nice, because it's so exciting. Now, Matti's an expert, yeah, on soil, but yeah, it's many functions that this soil has. And we are even looking at novel antibiotics because we only know about 3 or 5% of what's in the soil. Eh? So a lot to discover. We know more about the craters on the moon than we know about what's under your feet. And we can do a lot with that knowledge. And I really think a good paper by Schrama et al. Also, that we must leave this maximization of production. We can easily feed the world. That's nonsense. We throw away about 30%. We don't produce it where it is. And we see that our conventional productivity is going down. We see that everywhere. Many soils are degraded because of intensive agriculture. And the yield gap, so the difference between the yield of conventional and, let's say, more organic, I would call nature inclusive, we have the ecological knowledge to actually enhance production. And to show you a few examples, we now know of this interaction, which can really be that if you have that knowledge, you can avoid and you can stimulate that they actually collaborate, intercropping and plant breeding with the microbiomes. We can actually do the plant breeding in that direction. So a transition, yes, we do need new business models, because if we want a farmer to be a landscape manager, we must pay for that. And if you build a road, you don't say to a road builder, well, you get maybe for a few kilometers for a year or two, you get some money and then we'll see. That's what we do with farmers. So you need to pay them for 20, 30 years to actually get things done and keep it that way. And we're also opening up, of course, a carbon market with the areas. Yeah, 5 minutes. Oh my God. Now, anyway, strip cropping is already giving a lot of sustainability in the landscape. A lot of functions, multi-functions. Do you see that? We have agroforestry, where we have a differentiation of crops as well, or maybe a complete nature and fully combined agro. And this was when I offered it to Minister van der Wal. We have these landscape elements, and we're now fighting for a 10% blue-green dooradering. I don't know what that is in English, but through the whole of the Netherlands, to bring back this beautiful, this is like the Maasheggen landschap, UNESCO biosphere area, and beautiful. Because we actually can make the Netherlands a hell of a lot nicer, but it's everywhere we have to do it. All these lines that I said are going down. I have too many slides, I know, but restore the habitats, and nature is very eager to come in. And that's the nice thing, which we showed for space for the river. And we actually got these animals. Now, they're not happy with all of them, but for the rest, fantastic. And we can even build new nature. This is really Dutch, this. And this is my building that I built for a couple of two of my centers as a director of the Netherlands Institute of Ecology, which was circular, which had a complete different energy transition and biodiversity. And we have open day coming Saturday. So if you want to visit us, it's fantastic. But anyway, green infrastructure, water and waterways, biodiversity, and then to get more biodiversity when you leave than than what was there when you arrive. And so we have tons of ditches and ponds and roadsides, etc. And there is a lot of local initiatives. So if you look at the website for the Dutch, Samen voor Biodiversiteit.nl, then you can see that, that all these different areas are already, people have this idea. And I really believe in this bottom up and in these successes. Yes, sure, we also do a lot of research, which I didn't talk about. but we got money from NWO about biodiversity recovery. So we do it in 3 different parts of the Netherlands. In the Bollenstreek, so the green bulbs, which use a hell of a lot of pesticides, of course. The Ooipolder, and in the Alblasserwaard in the Veenwold. So we work with farmers. We do the experimental work, also transdisciplinary, not even interdisciplinary, with social sciences and etc., but trans, because also with other stakeholders that are important. So I think my last slide, I think let nature speak. Think in systems. We have to go from ego to eco. We must see nature inclusiveness not as just a requirement that can be neglected, but so not as an option, but as a requirement. I mean, multiple values that go beyond our economic, financial, where we have to combine challenges and where we work with nature. I always say biological control is working with nature, because you use the enemy of your enemy is your friend, right? So, and chemical pesticides are basically end of pipe solutions to a problem you already created, right? So you shouldn't create it. It's like pharmacy as well. You can take a pill or you have a better lifestyle. And the problem is, with a better lifestyle, nobody earns the money. With a pill, it does. Same with the pesticide industry. So that's a problem. Soil is the basis of biodiversity. And I think you should all engage with society, not this ivory tower where you basically find out something nice and nobody will ever use it. I have a lot of experience in that. I think for me, biodiversity recovery, it's very much a bottom up, but it's also, and I think we may discuss this, it's the carrot and the stick. I love the carrot because you can inspire and you can bring people along, but we also need the stick. Yeah, we need the Johan Vollebroek, we need the Extinction Rebellion, we need blaming and shaming, we need that too. But it's not going to help if we only do that. We must show the successes of where it is already different. And I have to be honest, that's what I get my energy from. Otherwise, I would be completely, it's between hope and despair. When I gave the Westelplezing on that, the VVD had come together and they already voted like, oh, this nitrogen, 53% said, let's forget about it. Now, I was in the Commissie Remke, so it was, nothing has been done with it. Very frustrating. And then the VVD also said that they wanted to drive 130 again. It was the first advice of the Commissie Remke. So we live in a very polarized world right now, and I hope to discuss with you how we can all together bring back our biodiversity. And my excuses for too many slides, but okay.
We have time for a few questions to clarify, and then have a discussion later. So if you have any questions about the presentation specifically, then this is your chat. No? Happy. All clear.
I have a very specific question.
Yeah.
Sure.
You mentioned that open day.
Yeah.
Where?
Yeah. Oh, didn't I include that slide?
No.
Huh? I only told it. Okay. Netherlands Institute of Ecology is opposite Wageningen University. So if you go to Wageningen University, you see the campus, and then on the other side, you see the beautiful building.
Oh, that's a nice slide.
And that's the Netherlands Institute of Ecology. And it's from 11 to 5. I give some tours from the building as well, but I'm not a director anymore, but there's like hundreds of things to do and see. Also for children. Very nice. But you don't have those yet. Yeah.
You said you were aiming for 10% more blue-green Netherlands. What's it right now?
That's really different per area, but ranging from 2 to 5, 6, perhaps.
What's the average right now?
Over the Netherlands, we don't know that yet. I know of certain areas that, that really started to study that. We know it's quite devastating what we did after the war. Of course, we pulled everything straight. And so these landscape elements are not just hedges and everything, they're also waterways, they're also, you know, it's really nice. So have a look at aanvalsplan landschap. Then you have it. I'm not the book boss.
Yeah, it's not, yeah.
You said to include for 20 years and 30 years what to pay the farmer, etc. How do you see that being incorporated in the current economic system?
Yeah, very good question. This is exactly why the Landbouw Accord actually collapsed, because we actually, it is in there, but we really need 20, 30 years, and then LTO stepped out, yeah, and but we calculated it was we need about 7 billion until 2030. And so, yeah, that's money, but we have about 24 billion for, you know, for the nitrogen problem, for example. These landscape elements have more than 20 functions. If you're Dutch and you want to know about them, then read the book of Clement Rijsdijk, which is called Heg. That's only Heg, that's the book. It's really a really nice little book. And it gives you more than 20, and then he also calculated how many millions you actually can do. So yeah, and we must pay it from public, but not only from public, like we do when we say we build the roads and the infrastructure. That's nobody asks, well, we're going to spend our tax money on that. No, we think that's normal. Well, the landscape is of everybody. Yeah, the ground can be of a person, but the landscape is everybody's. So we must change that. And it has to come between the ears. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Now
Yeah,
Niels.
thank you. Yeah, so then we'll have Niels, assistant professor at the IVM, the Institute for Environmental Studies here at VU. And yeah, to focus on land systems. So you'll tell a bit more about the systems that you already touched upon, I guess. So
land use in the Anthropocene. Yes, thank you for the introduction as well. And also thank you for the previous presentation. It was hopeful. And sometimes we do need that. And I'm sorry, I'm going to be a bit of a party pooper after that. I want to talk a bit about the relationship that we have with land and with nature, and how that has created some of the somewhat crazy stuff that we see. Well, everybody must include this graph in these lecture series, right? Sure, I think that's the rule, eh? But because it's already been shown, I will be very quick about this. I mean, these are all the planetary boundaries that have a relationship with land, and mostly that relationship is quite strong. Eh? So we often tend to focus quite hard on climate change, but you know, all these other, in fact, the ones that are related to land, they are all transgressed, all of them. So that's also another coincidence. Eh? So I'm going to skip over this because we've already seen it twice, and more question a bit. How did we get here? How do we start abusing our lands and our natural systems in such a way? And that's what I call our toxic relationship with nature. Well, this is the island of Madeira, and are there people who speak Portuguese here? No. Madeira in Portuguese, I've been told, because I don't speak Portuguese, it actually translates to lumber or wood. So then this picture of Madeira in the 1500s is a bit ironic. There's almost not a single tree standing anymore. Now, why was that? Because in Madeira, you could plant sugar. They innovated the system. It used to be before the 1500s, if you even get 100 grams of sugar, that would be, you could almost not pay for that. Even kings couldn't pay for 100 grams of sugar. Now they invented the plantation of the sugarcane and basically started plantation agriculture. Sugar also requires, for 1 kilogram, 60 kilograms of wood has to be burned, and that's why. But that's not what really was invented in Madeira. What was invented in Madeira was an ID, capital I, ID, that we are different from nature, that nature and society are two different things, right? It's an innovation, you could say, and it's an innovation that has been quite important because the whole colonial projects would not have succeeded without that idea that we are separate from nature. So what is nature then? Well, before the 1500s, people wouldn't really know what you mean, right? You're basically asking a fish, what is water? Well, you don't know. So that was quite a big moment in human philosophical history. Not all humans were part of nature, by the way, not of society. I mean, society with a big S. Some of us would be part of that. Most of us wouldn't have been. People of color would not have been part of society. Most women not part of society. They would be part of nature. Even if you look at how indigenous people were called in the newly found colonies, they were often called naturales. So kind of speaks to itself there. Nature is different from society. Nature is something we can exploit, we can dominate, we can use, and we can destroy. It becomes an othering of nature, basically. And that goes very much contrary to previously held beliefs in Europe, but also contrary to most indigenous systems where nature is vital. It's alive, it's part of us. And you would maybe sometimes chop down a tree, but you would never have the idea to chop down all the trees. That would be ridiculous. Who would do that? So then the quote of Ben Ehrenreich is something that always sticks to me. Only once we imagined the world as dead could we dedicate ourselves to making it so. Now, then nature became also something to be managed or to be administrated. This is a picture I took myself, actually, in Southwest Ethiopia. It's a very off the beaten track place. You wouldn't go as a tourist there, but I was there as a researcher. And you see a plantation in the background, but this is quite recent. Before, like even a couple of years before I took that picture, this was a indigenous agricultural area, rotational system. So you would have a bit of forest, then they would slash it down, plant some crops there, and have a rotation where they repeat that cycle over and over again, maintaining soil quality in this way. It's very much balanced as much as possible with what the soil could give, what the climate could give. But that was difficult for the state. The state of Ethiopia, when they started moving into this area, building roads and so on, well, I mean, who owns the land? Well, we all own the land. Difficult. Hard to put that on paper. Yeah, so hard to administer such systems where nature is still vital, where nature is still something that is part of society. So they got rid of that as fast as possible, tried to give everybody individual land titles. When that failed, because it had to fail, right? Because the soil couldn't give that much. Most people they fled away, or they were villagized into newly made villages that functioned very poorly. And I visited some of them. They were quite miserable places to see. So then the land was instead given to plantation owners. This happened all over the global south. Also happened here in Europe, actually. The privatization of the commons, the enclosures, right? And the disenchantment of the world in Max Weber, because I can be a bit high-minded today. I'm giving a lecture. But yes, all that was vital, all that was magical about the world had to disappear. Nature then also became an enemy to be conquered. And this is one of my all-time heroes, Rachel Carson, writing a book that still influences generations of scientists and activists. Silent Spring, where she describes this springtime in the rural countryside where no birds are heard because they're all dead because of the pesticides. She actually she was proven right over and over again that pesticides indeed would lead to such a silent spring. And I think if you would transport her to the here and now, in many places of the Netherlands, she would think that her nightmare came true. But nature became this enemy to be conquered, and it didn't matter for society with the big capital S that we were not in balance with nature. No, we could just solve these problems one by one. And here you can see glyphosate, and that's basically you kill everything except that what you want to see growing. That's the complete nuclear option that we now use in agriculture. More and more plants are coming back because that also is, nature is vital, nature is alive, it will come back. and develop resistance to glyphosate, or be able to withstand it, well, then we just innovate again and try to also conquer more. And well, anyway, that's our relation with nature, toxic relation. And in recent years, and this is where my own research mostly comes in, it went into overdrive. The same relation, it's going faster and faster and faster. This is a map I made. It was all the mega stables that we have in Europe. I just used some statistical data for that. All the stables or the farms that have more than 500 livestock units in them. That's quite some hotspots here and there. But the thing is here, these farms, they are not related to the land that they are on, right? There's not enough land to feed all that cattle. They get their feed from elsewhere. They get it mostly from, for example, places like the Brazilian Amazon, which is then being deforested. And we create a sort of connection across the world where the whole world is connected, but we don't have the connection ourselves to nature anymore. And that creates a certain amount of vulnerabilities in the system. And this is one of the scariest graphs that I know. It's about multiple breadbasket failure in different climate scenarios. Now, 1P5 or 2P0 is the temperature increase. And there's always going to be a breadbasket region is like a region that produces quite a lot of our foods. Yeah? So, for example, you have the grain breadbaskets and the soy breadbaskets. And they are quite important. And it's not so bad if one of them has a bad harvest because we have multiple of them. And so we can always compensate a little bit. It becomes worse if 2 of them fail, and even worse if 3 of them fail, and so on and so on. And you can see quite clearly that under under the 1.5 or even 2 degrees Celsius, it all shifts a bit to the left, and then we see that multiple of them can fail at the same time, which is the consequence of this networked approach that we now have, where we globalize our whole food system. Creates kind of this kind of patterns where the food price index over time, can sometimes start to spike up and down, and the system becomes a bit wobbly by being so connected and by being so much under pressure from climate change, biodiversity crisis, and so on. We saw that for the first time happening here in 2007. And now it's actually happening again quite quickly. So the consequence of such a spike, which is happening more and more, is there's mostly people who are already poor and living in poor countries, they get hungry. But an indirect consequence is something that I studied in my PhD, which was about large-scale land acquisitions, land grabbing. What we saw is some of the countries that are very import dependent and that rely on imports to feed their population, they start to get a bit nervous because, well, if this happens, what happens then is that all the countries that are producing food, they close their borders. They say, well, it's our food now. We're not going to export while there is a food price hike, obviously. Yeah? And then import-dependent countries who don't have their own production become very nervous. Some of them are also quite rich. And they were then they were thinking, what can we do? We can maybe acquire the land itself. Instead of the food, we just buy the land itself. And that's how land grabbing was born or sped up. I would rather say this is a map we made, and it just all the land grabs in the world are on this map. Yeah, the Netherlands is definitely participating in this. So we have, or companies in the Netherlands are involved in this quite heavily. I mean, if you just look outside and you'll find some of them. And this is what we did. We looked a bit what this does to the local landscapes that are being grabbed. This is Laos. And we just ran our simulation models on this. We have some of these models that can look into the future under certain scenarios. And this was quite stark. There were 2 scenarios here. One where we allow for land grabbing, and one where we would ask the model to produce the same amount of commodities, in this case, rubber, arable crops, and also some forestry and cash crops. The same amount was produced, but just by smallholders. And you can see there's a terrible inefficiency in this system, because the smallholders, when they produce rubber, they do it in a system where it's integrated in their farm, and they also produce some food, and it's much more efficient to do it that way. But the plantations, they make these systems impossible because they dominate the market, they dominate the land. Yeah, that was quite devastating to see. We took that model also to Cambodia, where we asked stakeholders there, what scenarios do you want us to run? And they said, well, actually, the biggest problem is not even that they're taking our land, it's that they're not even using it, which was quite surprising to me when I heard that. And I started mapping it, and you can actually see it here. These are the plantations in the squares, but then you can see barely any of it is really being used as agriculture. And well, it also encroaches on protected areas, so there's a double problem there that was quite difficult, especially because Cambodia also at the same time wanted to introduce tigers again, which is an extinct animal in Cambodia, but is also their national animal, so they were kind of hoping to reintroduce them, but at the same time then also getting all these plantations into their protected areas. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to go too much into the results, but these are the kinds of things that happen when we start grabbing for control, because that's really what we're doing here. This is trying to solve the same problems, this toxic relationship with nature at a global scale. That's really what is happening here. I'm gonna maybe, well, yeah, I brought it all together a bit with, yeah, that basically more and more of the land that we manage is in the hands of value chain actors at a global scale, and not anymore in the hands of land managers or state actors. So that the agency who can decide over land becomes more and more a global thing. Now, part 4. We can use land to solve problems as well, and we've seen some ideas already. But we can do that in different ways. One way is to build on that same toxic relationship, and then this is what can happen. And this is one example is in carbon offsetting projects. You can indeed store quite a lot of carbon in trees, and you can do that by planting them, or you can do that by and this is what mostly happens, most people don't know this, but if somebody says, I am going to chop down this forest, and you say, no, you're not, then that is also carbon offsetting. Then you have prevented this forest from being chopped down. So therefore those emissions are not in the atmosphere. So therefore you can sell carbon offsets. Yeah. That's in a very small nutshell how carbon offsetting works. If you look at what countries are promising right now, in terms of, they all rely on, to some extent, on carbon offsetting to make their climate pledges work, their net zero plans. I mean, then we would have to plant or maintain 1.2 billion hectares of land, which, yeah, is a bit much. Yeah, so that's what happens when you perpetuate this relationship with land that is quite toxic. Similar things are happening with plastics now. This was actually quite new to me, but a colleague of mine, Levi Helm, he was modeling how if we would indeed stop using normal plastics and then move to bioplastics, that we would have something quite similar actually. And you would find that in such scenarios where we mitigate our plastic pollution, up to 22% cropland expansion is needed for this. 35 of the existing croplands must intensify, and 20% extra deforestation is embedded in such a system. So that's also, I mean, and that I think almost nobody really knows that this is happening. Part 5, because there is an end to this. We can also imagine a bit, you know, can we also do this in a different way? Can we find a new relationship with land that is not quite so toxic? I think so. I know so. Actually, I've also done some research on this. But let me first show you one very important thing is land is limited. So the first thing we would have to do is come to terms with the fact that we cannot solve all our problems with lands, right? So this carbon offsetting, this plastics mitigation, for example, that always requires more and more land to be used. But actually, we should start using less of it. One way to do that quite clearly is to move away from the average American diet and to go more towards either of the alternatives, really either of them, it's fine. But especially if you look at grassland needed, so much less it can be is needed for a vegan diet. You can barely see how much it is. And so this is work by a colleague of mine, also again using similar models as I presented before, that yeah, we need to come to terms with that land is limited. And then the land that we still use, we can still think of how we can use it in a better way. I've done some research for the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, UNCCD. And they were looking for, they always have technologies to combat desertification, land management strategies, and it will all be very top-down, technological. But they asked me to also look a bit into governance and basically land tenure systems. And what we found is that there's plenty of evidence that if you give people that are in a somewhat good relationship with land, if you give them the rights and the space to do that, then they tend to take better care of their land. And so if you give people solid land rights, communal land rights, I showed you the picture in Ethiopia, if you would have given these people the communal land rights system and the self-governance systems that they already had in the first place, we would probably not have seen this kind of devastating plantation development, which involved a lot of deforestation as well. And so I've just got some examples that we found in the literature review, which included hundreds of papers. This is in Tibet, where in fact we saw that there were two systems. One was already transformed into a private land ownership system, and the other was still communally managed, and the grazing was basically nomadic. And you can see that there's in this nomadic communal system, which is self-governed, there was much less land degradation, much less. Similar things is one of the most beautiful scientific papers I've ever read. I would really recommend it to you, about farmer-managed natural regeneration programs. And they found that in Niger that there's quite a lot of desertification happening there. It's devastating, and it's because, to a large extent, because farmers there were taught always since colonial times that a good farm is a clean farm. You must chop down all the shrubs that are popping up everywhere. You must clear them as fast as possible, and then you're a good farmer. But that actually created a lot of erosion, and wind erosion was really devastating. No soil moisture was there. It was hot. But some communities started to find that, in fact, the opposite is true, and the old systems, the indigenous systems, would still be better, would be much better, but they were struggling to replant trees. It was barely possible to plant trees because the soil was so completely destroyed from this long colonial time. And then actually it's discovered that underground, under the soil, just a meter below, these trees are still there actually. And they're sprouting up from time to time, and they were all slashing them down because that's what they learned. But in fact, you could nurture those coppices, and then by itself, nature would actually restore itself. But it doesn't go automatically. You have to give people the rights to these trees. You have to give people solid land rights, and also an infrastructure where people are in community with each other, can decide how they're going to manage this resource. So all of that has to happen. It's not just about technologies. That's really what we found in this UNCCD work. It's really also about the communities that have to be empowered. This is very hopeful. Nature seems to pop up by itself if given the chance, and if given a good human environment system that is well governed. It's all there still. A very recent example to finish this off. We know this place maybe, Lahaina in Hawaii, which was terribly burned down by wildfires, which these wildfires are not natural. They were created basically by a system which extracts all the water from this island into resorts and golf courses, so that it becomes a very dry place. Now, a Nature paper found very recently, actually, that more traditional land use is one of the things that would help prevent future tragedies. And I mean, the paper again is quite beautiful. That in fact, the old systems would basically keep the land quite wet. And when there would be extraction from forests, they would always make sure that this extraction was done in such a way that it would not create conditions for fires or for permanent scars, let's say. And then this finishes off in a scientific paper with That's why this fire started, because no one had a relationship to these places. It's really going back to that relationship, which is similar to, and that's the last slide, what happens in New Zealand. Maybe some people have heard about the kauri tree dieback. It's again not a happy story. Kauri trees are monumental trees that people tend to have a very special relationship with. That goes for indigenous people, but also for settlers, if you can call them that way. I'm actually not so sure. But they all develop this relationship with this tree. There's something about that tree that people just love. But they're all dying, and it was for a long time not so clear why. Now they think it's probably some bacterial disease in the soil, but it's very difficult to find out what exactly is going on. And conservationists really they put their hands in the air and said, we don't know, we can't rescue these trees. We've closed down the tracks around them, we've tried to measure all the soil samples and so on. We don't know what's happening. And then in a sort of Hail Mary approach, they said, well, we'll just give it back, we'll give the ownership back to the Maori people. They will do some traditions there. And it actually it felt a bit weird, but they started doing traditions of creating a sort of cultural band around the trees and a perimeter, and then more things that are not well written down, but we should totally study it. But yeah, very clearly what they did, and they also describe this in the paper, is they created a holistic approach where they took care of the whole landscape, not just the one tree. And again, the quote of one of these people that were doing this is quite beautiful. It all comes down to people needing to examine quite carefully their relationship with nature, consider the extractive attitude we have, that nature is just this infinite thing, the thing that we should go and extract and experience or make a resource out of. So we need to start thinking of it like a mother or a family member. We need to invest in it and look after it. This is the approach that we are now relearning, and this is really crucial. We are relearning this because these are not things that were invented. They were effectively destroyed mostly by well, colonial powers, industrial agriculture in Europe also did this thing. But we need to reappreciate these things, and then nature will come back surprisingly quickly, actually. That was it for my side.
The hope, I don't know if you know Common Land, commonlands.com.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the 4 returns of Common Land. Basically, you make natural capital, you know that. But so much of what you said is a Common Land approach, also
Absolutely,
a landscape approach. And what I got, and I think you should all see it, is lessons from the Lus Plateau. Lessons, Lus is that earth soil,
Soil, yeah.
and that's a whole part in China that has been regenerated in 10 years time, which by giving them a piece of land and take care of it, and so that if there's it makes my hair stand up. It's so hopeful. The lessons from the Lus Plateau, and the filmmaker is John Liu, L-E-U. And it's on YouTube, and it's absolutely fantastic. Where the World Bank and universities, it can only happen in China. It's the cradle of Chinese civilization that was recovered into nature within 10, 12 years.
Yeah, it's insane how quickly things can grow.
Yeah, absolutely. If you create the right conditions,
the right societal structures.
Yeah.
As well. Yeah.
The lesson you showed the slide in New Zealand about the tree.
Yes.
What did you mean with it was not written up well enough, but would you improve? You read it? Or?
Yeah. So I mean, it's interesting. For a long time, scientists, especially Western scientists, were looking a bit down on these indigenous practices, right? All these, they're doing their weird traditions again, right? But nowadays, more and more scientists are like saying, "Oh, actually makes sense." Like we didn't look at it from that perspective, but actually, yes. If one example is there was a treatment against tree dieback that involved creating a ring of 100 meters of fire around it, and then they would have to dance and sing songs and whatever, lots of these kinds of things. First of all, like, that's just a weird tradition. But then they found out, yeah, that actually works. There's something in the soil that happens if you put a fire or a ring around it, something happens. But then they have to start figuring out what it is. And that's what I mean when I say scientists might want to start quickly studying a bit more with respect for these people, but quickly start studying what's happening there, because we can learn a lot. It's part of this, well, not 3.5 billion years of R&D, but human societies, human nature relationships
Absolutely.
are also the product of innovation after innovation in a very iterative way. And we kind of did a tabula rasa at some point when we developed this new relationship with nature. And now we are rediscovering.
Yeah, and common land again in Western Europe, Australia works with the Aboriginals. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
And we can learn so much. And also pharmaceutical companies, they run after the indigenous people because they know which plants make them better. And, and unfortunately, that's another colonial problem whatsoever. Anyway.
Sure. Am I the maestro? Or,
Yeah, I don't know. Up there we can start. And yeah, there was a question there, no? Somewhere? Yeah.
Thank you very much for the excellent presentation. It's very inspiring, and they also were very complimentary. So it was really nice to listen to them back to back. My question is more not a question, but a reflection. I first joined this university about 18 years ago, and there were already a lot of our colleagues working here at the Center for International Cooperation, like Israel, William Fiji, Steven Torren, that were working on nature-based solutions. And I remember they collaborated with World Bank Institute, WOCA, for the review of conservation approaches and technologies, trying to move beyond technologies and thinking more about social approaches, like social fencing that we were discussing, where actually people manage to protect nature with rituals or other ways. And I was wondering what has happened or what is different now compared to basically 20 years ago or 15 years ago that would allow us to bend the curve, like it was in your initial presentation. What other factors can help us bend the curve?
Well, I think I strongly believe that there is a new vision coming from the whole financial system. And that sounds ridiculous, perhaps, to a lot of people. But this pledge for this financial pledge for biodiversity, which was joined with, I think, 90 different big institutions, in banks, pension funds, insurance companies, etc., investors, asking for transparency on your dependency of nature. And it was, I think there is something in there that actually can make the system shift. It's also the naming and shaming, the reputation risk, the court, the court bringing them to court, etc. That it's horrible that it has to go that way, but I think that makes a change. I believe in that. There's so in that way, I think something has changed. But also the fact that we join more in an interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary way in our research, and we look more at solutions, and we look more. We see the disaster in front of our eyes. Also, the big disasters with climate is becoming so clear. Maybe I'm just an idiot optimist, but I always say I rather die frustratingly than give up now. So we must have hope, and it's the bottom-up initiatives, like also Common Land does. The ecosystem restoration camps. If you guys don't have anything to do, go for a couple of months. Go there. Ecosystem restoration camps are in more than 40 countries now, where anybody can go and help and do hands-on ecosystem restoration. And so have you seen that 20 years ago? I haven't. No. I've seen a lot of ivory tower research.
Yeah, there were a lot of bottom-up grassroots.
Yeah, and the challenge will be how to
But they were not serving out like farm and managed natural regeneration.
Exactly.
And then I mean, all these things were done on a large scale by small farmers. But
Yeah.
the industry comes in
and throws them over, right?
I'm really glad to get your perspective of what has changed and what we can leverage to make these grassroots initiatives more visible and more appealing.
Well, but another thing is that, you know, I came in the era farmers of when in the 70s, for example, where biological dynamic, Steiner kind of farming was little, but it was very present. And it was also that people thought, well, this is it. And then I thought, well, we're not going to change the world if that goes from 0.2% to 0.3%. Yeah, so I thought it's much better to move conventional agriculture 5% all over the world. Huh? So it's a different way of. So I lose my dogmatic approach to things. Yeah? So I see we have these huge technological things, and we have the also very dogmatic. And we have the dogmatic. No, but I hope you recognize that. Or you have something that you're 100% sure it has to be this, and these don't talk to one another. And I think they must influence one another. They must meet one another because.
But I think that one benefit of the Anthropocene is things are becoming very clear. Exactly. Also for the big companies that the era of no consequences is over.
Exactly.
And in Lahaina we've seen it comes to bite us now, these crises.
Yeah.
And then start going over the menu of possible solutions. Many of them start to be dismissed because they will not solve the problems. And so even I have to say, maybe it's a bit against my nature, but even a company like Unilever right now is very interested in regenerative agriculture because it works. And it will maybe work for 20 more years instead of for 10 more years, let's say.
But we still have to fight large, big companies and industries, because you didn't even mention the burning of wood for energy. So the deforestation, and then you should look at the increasing lines that has been mentioned, where we cut down forests all over the world and bring it to sort of burn in our coal plants. I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous, but it happens, and we subsidize it. Now, this is for the first time that our subsidies, our agricultural farm subsidies, have also been analyzed. Like, do they really, what do they really do, these subsidies? Oh, wait a minute. These subsidies are the subsidies that actually intensify, that actually do exactly what we don't want. So the transparency of knowing such subsidies is already important, you know? We can talk about fossil fuel subsidies, but there's a lot of subsidy, and that's really subsidy going from Europe to our farming systems. And so if we can, that's again money, if we can change that, if you look at the income of farmers, some farmers, then if you have less costs at the front bit, all these farmers are being visited by companies that want to sell something, pesticides and artificial fertilizer, but if they don't do that, they can produce less and have a better financial margin. And so the problem is, I told you, Sjoerd, that farmers don't talk to one another anymore. And so you have these farmers and you have these farmers, right? And these farmers are sometimes telling these farmers to shut up. You're not representing agriculture. So
Polarization.
It's polarization. Yeah, that's very unfortunate.
Yeah, and a question, but also first a remark. I think on the last end, I think you see more in farmland that it's opening up. There are more living labs. How you also showed that, like a Weiland, there are more.
Yeah, Weiland is also.
And talk with each other. So I thought.
Yeah,
that's also good to see throughout the entire Netherlands. But then a question more about, we lost connection with nature. In the Netherlands, there's barely any connection, or there's barely any nature anymore. How can we create this connection with nature in the Netherlands? Because of course this what the pictures you showed were all like outside of Europe.
Yeah.
How can we create that in Europe and specifically more in the Netherlands?
Yeah, wow. Good one.
No, I believe in the public space.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I also think that many of the examples that Louise showed are nice because they're open for public, so that helps. But I mean, yeah, fundamentally, I think we should probably move back to agroecology, and then that will require more people to work on the land again. But that this is a long-term dream, and I do to get like concrete steps towards this. I'm sorry, I don't know really. Like one example, I heard research about songs that we sing. We are on the radio, and they checked, and songs over the last 50 years used to be more about nature, and now barely any song is ever about nature anymore. And so it's quite a stark thing. But I have no idea actually how to. Maybe
No.
David Attenborough knows, but
No, I don't agree with you.
Okay,
I think
that's fair.
I think I do know. We go to maakgrijsgroener.nl. So we have a big public campaign about biodiversity. I mean, people don't even get it out of their throat. And now, after years, it's everywhere. The landscape elements is everywhere. It's in Nationaal Programma Landelijk Gebied. It's in Mooi Nederland. It's in Provinciaal Plan Landelijk Gebied, etc. So it's in the provinces. It's in between the ears, and I think think of all the dikes. People in the Netherlands, they like everything cut short and straight, and like you say, the farmers. But if you see it more, it becomes more of what you think is normal. We need a new normal in the Netherlands. And that's not just that's also in farmland. These differences that you can do with your farmland. With Urgenda, for example, we did the 1,001 acres where we paid farmers to experiment with a different geen Engels rijgras, so no just one species of biodiversity grass, but a collection of herbs and in their grassland, and it worked.
A common theme actually in both of your talks is also about, of course, what Niels said, the value chain actors are the only one who benefit, and the land managers are able to say, let alone the farmers, to say about the land use. And you also make actually connection to the big financial corporate institutions who want to do something about biodiversity loss. So it's just the economy.
Yeah, it is.
It's all about the economy. What is in fact steering actually our destruction of the land.
Absolutely, it is the economy.
And maybe it's even more difficult to change the economy. I don't know. So where on both ends, maybe you need changes also.
Maybe, or repurposing. There are many systems that are outside of the economy, and it would not be so far-fetched to me to say that food and water should not be part of the economy, but should be a global commons, managed of course, but not marketized the way it is right now. But that again, there's no clear approach right now, no clear step that you can take to make that happen, except maybe, I don't know, go to the streets.
Never expected. Yeah, it's actually an interesting remark, Sjoerd. And maybe it's a question to you or all three of you. Do you believe that in the current economic system where basically companies have to make profit, are legally obliged to make profit for their shareholders, do you believe that in such a world we can ever solve our anthropocenic problems?
All of them. Well. It's gonna be quite hard, I think, because that system needs to grow, and land is limited. So we can solve quite a lot here, but that's also a privilege, I would say. We can make our country look very beautiful and green, but then on the other side of the world, things are maybe we are transporting part of that degradation then, because the system must grow. So that's the not so hopeful part. I think it's no, I don't know, but I think no, we cannot solve these things within capitalism. No.
Well, I think we need revolution and not evolution. Yeah. So that's the difficult part. But on the other hand, there are signs, like we just heard, where there are signs of the impossibility to continue for even the bigger companies. Yeah, I can give a talk, which I do for all the food industry, yeah, like the veevoer industry, yeah. So Nevedi, that's the koepel, yeah, of all the ones that get the soya from Brazil and for our, yeah, right. And basically we're pushing them with the world data. I said, how can you guys go on? You know, you need a different earning model as well. Eh? Otherwise you'll become the dinosaur, you know? Yeah, or you change. So how can you change? And I'm not going to tell you how you change, but you should change. I mean, that's the kind of thing we say to the Unilevers and to you. I don't know if you know who makes the decision for farmers, but it's like so many farmers, and then it's that so many farmers, and then a few companies and institutions actually decide on the price, and then you have so many consumers. And all we do is look at the consumers, and the farmers do that too. They look at the consumers and they say, well, yeah, all these citizens are critical, but the consumers is another person. And when they want to pay, they take the lowest price, right? Yeah. But I say, you shouldn't look at the consumers only. You look at the system that we should have this farmer not only produce food, so he has an income that comes also outside the end product of what he produces. So you pull him more towards nature, into nature, and you actually he has a better financial result. Now, if that's the case, I think the Netherlands can play a huge role for all metropoles in the world, because we are a city-state. So if we can produce sustainable food plus recovery biodiversity, we could be the leader in the world, like we have been with the Green Revolution, which we actually created this disaster. So yeah.
Maybe I can also give a hopeful spin, because
yeah, go ahead.
I did some research on this question actually, and looked at what, given this agency shifted triangle that I showed, where everything is going to the value chain actors, what can they do? And they can do quite a lot actually. It's fun because there's not so many of them. So if they do something, it tends to be quite huge impacts that happen there. So that, plus also a very thorough revaluation of why we do what we do. Why do we produce food? We do it to feed people, and not to make profits. That would be my dream, but we should probably curtail their profit-making mechanisms, and we've done that in the past with other businesses as well. So maybe I'm a bit too pessimistic in my first answer, and we can maybe do a bit more than by regulations and by forcing them to provide certain minimums around the world. Yeah, world hunger is going up, so we need to also consider this.
Yeah, one last question I would say.
It's directly related to what you were just talking about. I know that in certain food standards, the global gold standard for certain kinds of products, bananas, for example, dates, pomegranates, is actually European or American, but a lot of those aren't actually native to those parts of the world. How do we reconcile that, especially given what you were both talking about the idea of kind of returning the rights of nature to the people who actually work with nature?
Yeah, that's definitely true. Well, we have the what is the protocol, Nagoya protocol. So basically, you're not allowed anymore to just sort of go there and then bring it home to your, start culturing it and sort of earning money with it. That's the Nagoya protocol. So the rights of local people. And the ownership of, let's say, for local people is guaranteed.
Yeah,
you hope. But it used to be like that. We would just rob a country, and then we use that biological material for plant breeding or whatever, and then earn a hell of a lot of money. Now that's not longer possible already for years. But that's. I also see that we only feed the world with 12 crops, like I said. So there's thousands. And that of course is due to the Monsantos and the now Bayer, etc. dominance, and the monopolies, and so if we can break through that only slightly already because of better breeding methods that are also less limited to these larger companies, then which we also see that happening with IPs, with intellectual property rights, etc. Yeah, so I say what gives me hope is that everything is in beweging. Everything's moving right now, which certainly I'm old. I haven't seen that all those years. I'm from the Silent Spring generation, right? And yeah, I'm serious. Now I have 2 grandchildren, and I think, bloody hell, is there any nature left? You know, when they are in, hopefully 2100. You know, just so that gives me a lot of energy also to fight for. And you're all young. I mean, it's your land, it's your world. So you don't give up, right? Yeah.
Great. I can't top that still.
Good. So I think that's very nice closing words. Thank
Don't
you
give
for
up.
that. Thank you both for the presentations, the interesting discussion. Thank you all for questions, for being here, for sharing.